The Galactic Council thought humanity's final warning was theater. Commander James Mercer stood before 47 species, his hands steady, his voice calm as stone. "You have 72 hours, he said. Withdraw from the Tau Ceti colonies. Release our civilians, or we respond." The chamber erupted in chittering laughter. Humans, with their single homeworld, threatening an empire of thousands? But Mercer didn't flinch. He simply placed a black data chip on the podium. "This contains our full operational plan. We're giving you one chance to avoid what comes next." The Archon of the Velk Dominion crushed the chip beneath his talon. "Your species," he hissed, "is a footnote." Mercer smiled. Cold, terrible. "Then read the footnote carefully. If you're enjoying this story from HFY Endurance Tales, hit that like button and subscribe, because what humanity unleashes next will rewrite everything the galaxy thought it knew about war. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest. Now let's move forward into the trial that will prove whether mercy or vengeance defines the human soul. 73 hours later, nothing had changed. The Velk fleets remained in Tau Ceti orbit. 2 million human colonists were locked in detention centers on the surface. Their crime being settlement on a world the Dominion had claimed retroactively through council manipulation. Commander James Mercer sat in the operations center of the UNSS Valiant, humanity's flagship, watching the countdown reach zero. Around him, 40 screens displayed tactical feeds, diplomatic channels, and real-time intelligence from across 5 star systems. "They think we're bluffing," said Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the communication station. Her voice was tight. Intercepted chatter from the Velk command ship. "They're calling our warning primitive posturing." Mercer didn't respond immediately. He was watching a smaller screen, a feed from Tau Ceti 4 showing children behind chain-link fencing, their faces pressed against wire. One girl, maybe 7 years old, held a sign someone had given her. It read, "We are citizens. Protect us." "Sir?" Chen pressed. "Send the authorization codes to Fleet Admiral Torres," Mercer said quietly. "Execute Protocol Dreamweave." Chen's fingers hesitated over her console. "Sir, we've never deployed it in live combat. The simulations." "The simulations are over, Lieutenant." Mercer's gray eyes stayed locked on that little girl's face. The Velk had their warning. They made their choice. Within seconds, encrypted packets burst across the human fleet. 300 ships spread across a dozen staging points, invisible to Velk sensors, waiting in the cold dark between stars. On the bridge of the Valiant, Mercer pulled up a secondary feed. It showed a Velk counselor being interviewed on a pan-galactic network, his scaled features smug with confidence. "Humans possess nothing we fear," the counselor declared. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their diplomacy is crude. They stumbled into the stars barely a generation ago, and now they demand respect they haven't earned. This tantrum over Tau Ceti will end when they realize the futility of..." The broadcast cut to static. Then every Velk military frequency, every civilian network, every diplomatic channel across their empire lit up simultaneously with the same message. It was Mercer's face, transmitted from the Valiant, and his voice was no longer calm. It was winter itself. "This is Commander James Mercer of the United Nations Stellar Forces. 72 hours ago, we gave you terms. You chose mockery. You chose to keep our people in cages. You chose war." He paused, and something in his expression made the galaxy hold its breath. "We will now show you what human war looks like." On 47 worlds across Velk space, the lights went out. Every power grid, every orbital platform, every military installation. The blackouts were surgical, simultaneous, impossible. The Velk Dominion, an empire of 12,000 years, went dark in 11 seconds. "How?" The Velk Supreme Commander's roar echoed across emergency channels. "How did they penetrate our networks?" In the operations center of the Valiant, Specialist Marcus Webb allowed himself a thin smile. He was humanity's lead cyber warfare officer, and for 6 months, he'd been planting what the teams called seeds. Microscopic intrusion packages embedded in every trade communication, every diplomatic exchange, every cultural broadcast humanity had shared with the galaxy. The Velk thought they were studying primitive human entertainment. They were actually installing their own apocalypse, one data packet at a time. Dreamweave is active, Webb reported. We have control of 83% of their critical infrastructure. Military command is blind. They're flying on manual navigation. Mercer nodded once. Phase 2. Target the blockade fleet at Tau Ceti. I want our people out of those cages within the hour. But as the human fleet began moving into position, a new presence materialized on the tactical display. A ship configuration nobody had seen before. It was massive, dwarfing even the largest Velk dreadnought. And it was broadcasting a signal in Old Velk, the ritual language of their warrior caste. Lieutenant Chen translated, her face going pale. Sir, they're issuing a blood challenge. They're saying they'll execute 100 colonists for every hour we maintain the blackout. Mercer's jaw tightened. The Velk were calling what they thought was a bluff. They still believed humanity would flinch, would negotiate, would prove itself weak when lives hung in the balance. They were about to learn otherwise. Relay to Fleet Admiral Torres, Mercer said, his voice dropping to something colder than vacuum. Weapons free. Capture that command ship intact. I want whoever gave that order alive. The countdown began, and this time, it was the Velk who were running out of time. The battle for Tau Ceti lasted 17 minutes. Human ships dropped out of quantum fold in a formation the Velk tactical computers couldn't parse. Not a sphere, not a battle line, but something fluid and predatory, like a school of fish moving as one mind. The Velk blockade fleet numbered 43 warships. They opened fire immediately, confident in their numerical advantage and technological superiority. They hit nothing. Every human vessel was where Velk targeting predicted, and then wasn't. The ships moved in micro-jumps, flickering in and out of normal space, faster than targeting solutions could lock. It wasn't technology the Velk recognized. It was something humanity had developed in the darker corners of theoretical physics, in labs the galaxy never knew existed. They're using quantum displacement fields, breathed tactical analyst Kiraseth aboard the Velk flagship Sovereign Dawn. She was Thalician, one of the Empire's client species, slender, four-armed, with compound eyes that could process light across 16 spectrums. Right now, those eyes were fixed in something approaching horror. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would... The Sovereign Dawn shuddered as magnetic grapples latched onto its hull from 4 directions. Human boarding craft, small and fast, had bypassed every defensive screen and clamped on like parasites. Kiraseth watched her tactical display helplessly as cutting torches began opening the outer hull. Sound the repel boarders alert, Commander Thexfor snarled. He was old guard Velk, scales dark with age, convinced that humans were barely evolved apes with stolen technology. I want those vermin spaced within. The bridge lights died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Then a voice came over the internal communication system. Calm, human, and utterly confident. Velk crew of the Sovereign Dawn, this is Captain David Chen of the UNSS Tempest. We have control of your reactor, your life support, and your weapons. You have 2 options. Option 1, stand down, surrender peacefully, and you will be treated according to the interstellar conventions on warfare. Option 2, resist, and we will vent every compartment except the detention blocks where our people are held. You have 60 seconds to decide. Thexfor's claws dug into his command chair. We outnumber them 100 to 1 aboard this ship. Will, Commander. Kira Set's voice was quiet but urgent. "We're receiving reports from all decks. Human forces are already at every critical junction. They're not moving like raiders. They're moving like they've had the ship's blueprints for months. They know exactly where to go. Because they did." Human intelligence had been mapping Velk vessels through remote scans, stolen data, and analysis of every piece of wreckage from previous skirmishes. When Mercer's teams boarded the Sovereign Dawn, they moved through it like they'd trained in its corridors their entire lives. 58 seconds after the ultimatum, HFY made his choice. "All units, engage. Drive them back to." The bridge door exploded inward, not from breaching charges, but from a shaped magnetic pulse that folded the reinforced metal like paper. Through the smoke walked 4 humans in combat armor, sleek, black, covered in sensor-scrambling mesh. The lead figure raised a hand, and HFY felt something grip him, an invisible force that lifted him from his chair and slammed him against the bulkhead. "Kinetic gloves," the human said, almost conversationally. "We learned a lot from Velk prisoner interrogation records. You use pain compliance extensively. We decided to develop something more immediate." Kira Set's 4 hands were raised in surrender, her bioluminescent patches flashing the Thalissian signal for non-combatant. The human leader, Captain Chen, she guessed, gave her a short nod. "You're the tactical analyst. I've read your work. Come with me. You're going to verify something." 10 minutes later, Kira Set stood in the Sovereign Dawn's detention processing center, watching as human soldiers cut through lock after lock, releasing confused and terrified colonists. The children came first. Policy, apparently. Human doctrine prioritized civilian extraction above tactical advantage. "Why?" Kira Set asked quietly. Chen was beside her, monitoring the evacuation through his helmet's HUD. "Why risk the operation's success for children? You could have secured the ship first, then extracted them." Chen glanced at her, and even through his helmet's visor, she could see the look in his eyes. "Because if we don't remember why we're fighting, we become what we're fighting against." He turned back to the evacuation. "We gave the Velk a chance to avoid this. They put kids in cages instead. That's the difference between us." But even as the last colonist was escorted to human transport ships, new alerts flooded in. The Velk weren't giving up Tau Ceti. They were escalating. 6 more battle fleets were converging on the system, and they'd just activated something humanity's intelligence had only suspected existed. Orbital kinetic platforms hidden in the asteroid belt, now warming up to bombard the colony world itself. "They're going to glass the surface rather than let us retake it," Chen said, his voice tight. "Commander Mercer, we have a problem." Across the void, aboard the Valiant, Mercer was already watching the same data. His hands were clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at his shoulder, her voice urgent. "Sir, those platforms will achieve firing solution in 8 minutes. If they launch, Tau Ceti 4 is gone. 2 million people, our people." Mercer was silent for 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. Then he turned to Specialist Webb. "Do we have infiltration access to those platforms?" "Negative, sir. They're air-gapped. No network connection. Completely isolated systems. We'd need physical access to hack them." "How long to get a team there?" 12 minutes minimum, even with quantum fold." Mercer looked back at the tactical display. The numbers were simple and brutal. 8 minutes until the platforms fired, 12 minutes until help could arrive. 4 minutes of mathematics that added up to genocide. Unless... "Contact Fleet Admiral Torres," Mercer said quietly. "Tell her to execute Contingency Osprey." Sarah Chen's eyes went wide. "Sir, Osprey is theoretical. We've never tested it outside simulation. The structural stress alone could—" "I'm aware of the risks, Lieutenant. Send the order." 30 seconds later, 3 human destroyers, the Falcon, the Merlin, and the Hawk, broke formation and accelerated toward the asteroid belt at velocities that should have torn them apart. Their quantum displacement fields weren't just moving them through space anymore. They were creating localized distortions in spacetime itself, allowing the ships to exceed safety limits by magnitudes. The Velk platform's automated defenses tracked the incoming ships and calculated intercept probabilities at less than 5%. The human vessels were moving too fast, too erratically. The platforms would achieve firing solution on Tau Ceti 4 before the destroyers could possibly reach them. But the humans weren't planning to reach them in time. They were planning to arrive during the bombardment. 4 minutes to impact, and the galaxy was about to witness something no species had ever attempted. A combat maneuver so insane, so mathematically improbable, that only humans would think it was worth trying. And in the detention blocks of Tau Ceti 4, a 7-year-old girl clutched her mother's hand and looked up at the sky, wondering if anyone was coming for them after all. The Falcon hit the first kinetic platform doing 0.97 light speed. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't need to. At those velocities, the ship itself became a relativistic projectile, and when it made contact, the platform didn't explode so much as cease to exist on a molecular level. The shockwave from the impact rippled across the asteroid belt, destabilizing orbits and triggering chain reactions among the smaller debris. Platform Alpha is eliminated, Specialist Webb reported from the Valiant's Operations Center, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. The Falcon. Jesus, sir, there's nothing left of her. The crew. I know, Specialist. Merker's voice was flat, controlled, but his hands gripped the edge of his console hard enough to make his knuckles white. Honor them by finishing this. What's the status on the remaining platforms? The Merlin and Hawk are engaging platforms Beta and Gamma, but sir, we've still got 3 more platforms charging. They've staggered their firing sequence. If even one launches, we lose the colony. On the tactical display, Mercer watched as 2 more human destroyers performed the same impossible maneuver. Quantum fold jumps that ended in controlled collisions, trading their ships and crews for the destruction of weapons that could kill millions. It was a calculus that made his stomach turn, but it was the calculus war demanded. The Merlin took out Platform Beta. The Hawk clipped Platform Gamma, but didn't achieve full destruction. The platform tumbled out of alignment, its firing solution degraded, but not eliminated. 3 platforms remained. No more destroyers in range. 4 minutes until they could fire. Get me Fleet Admiral Torres, Mercer said. The Admiral's face appeared on his screen seconds later. A woman in her 60s with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Commander, I'm watching the same data you are. We don't have assets to reach those platforms in time. I need creative options, Admiral. We're out of creative. We're into desperate. Torres paused, then continued quietly. There's one option. We use the Valiant itself, jump directly into the belt, take out the remaining platforms the same way we. Negative. Mercer's response was immediate. The Valiant is Fleet Command. If we lose this ship, we lose operational coordination across all theaters. The Velk have reserves moving into position. They're planning a counter-offensive. We lose the Valiant, we might save Tau Ceti but lose the war. Then we need a miracle, Commander, and in my experience, those don't. Sir, it was Captain David Chen's voice, cutting across the command channel from the captured Sovereign Dawn. We have a solution. It's insane, but it might work. The Sovereign Dawn's main gun. It's a plasma lance, designed for long-range precision strikes. If we can recalibrate it, we might be able to hit the platforms from our current position. Torres frowned. Captain, the Sovereign Dawn is a captured vessel with a Velk crew still aboard. Even if we could trust the firing systems, the targeting calculations at this range would require... Tactical Analyst Kiraseth, ma'am. Chen's image shifted, and suddenly the Thylician appeared on screen, her 4 hands moving rapidly across a Velk tactical interface. I can run the calculations. I helped design the Sovereign Dawn's targeting protocols. But Commander Chen is correct. The shots are nearly impossible. Margin of error is 0.003 degrees across a distance of 400,000 kilometers. Any deviation, and we miss entirely. Mercer studied the alien analyst for a long moment. Kira Seth met his gaze steadily, her compound eyes reflecting the red emergency lighting of the Velk bridge. She was Felician, not Velk, a client species that had been folded into the Dominion through conquest 3 generations ago. Everything in her body language said she understood exactly what was at stake. "Why help us?" Mercer asked quietly. "Your people are part of the Velk Empire. If humanity wins this war, your entire civilization's political structure changes." Kira Seth's bioluminescent patches flickered. A pattern Chen had learned meant bitter amusement. "Commander, my people didn't choose to join the Velk Empire. We were given the same choice you were, submit or be destroyed. The difference is, we submitted. We've spent 3 generations being civilized by our conquerors, watching them reshape our culture into something that serves their interests." She gestured at the detention center feeds, still playing on the monitors. "When I saw your soldiers cut through those locks, when I heard Captain Chen say, 'You remember why you're fighting,' that's when I understood. You're not primitives. You're what we could have been if we'd had the courage to resist." Silence stretched across the command channel for 3 seconds. "Admiral Torres," Mercer said, "authorize Captain Chen to attempt the shot. Analyst Kira Seth, you have 3 minutes to run your calculations. If this works, we'll owe you a debt." "If this works," Kira Seth replied, already pulling up targeting matrices, "I'll consider us even for the chance to pay back the Velk for what they did to my homeworld." The next 3 minutes were the longest of Mercer's career. On the tactical display, he watched the platforms continue their charging sequence. 86%, 89%, 92%. At 95%, they would achieve firing solution. At 100%, 2 million people would die. On the Sovereign Dawn, Captain Chen had his best gunners standing by at the plasma lance controls. The weapon itself was a beautiful piece of engineering. A magnetic acceleration chamber 300 meters long that could punch through a battleship's armor at extreme range. But it had never been designed for the kind of precision Kira Seth was asking of it. "Calculations complete," the Thalician announced. "Uploading firing solutions now. Captain Chen, you need to understand, these shots require perfect timing. The platforms are in orbital motion. We're in orbital motion. The plasma bolts will take 11 seconds to reach target. If any variable shifts by even a fraction, we miss." "Then we don't miss," Chen said simply. "Engage firing sequence." The Sovereign Dawn rotated slowly on its axis, bringing the main gun to bear. In the weapons control room, a human weapons specialist named Rodriguez took a deep breath and placed his hands on the firing controls. He'd trained for situations like this. High stakes, no margin for error, lives in the balance. But training and reality were different things. "Platform Delta is at 96% charge," Webb reported from the Valiant. 97, 98. "Firing solution locked," Kira Seth said, her voice steady, despite the 4 hands trembling slightly at her workstation. "Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Rodriguez pressed the firing stud. The Sovereign Dawn shuddered as its plasma lance discharged, sending a bolt of superheated matter screaming across the void at a significant fraction of light speed. 11 seconds felt like 11 hours, as every human in the fleet held their breath. Platform Delta reached 99% charge. The plasma bolt struck at dead center, punching through the reactor housing and triggering a catastrophic overload. The platform exploded in a flash that briefly outshone the local sun. "Target destroyed," Webb shouted. 2 platforms remaining. Platform Echo is at 94%. Platform Foxtrot at 92. "Recalculating," Kira Seth said, her hands flying across the interface. "New solutions uploading. Fire in 20 seconds. But 20 seconds was too long. Platform Echo would reach firing threshold in 15. I need that solution now, Chen said urgently. Calculations require minimum processing time or they're useless, Kiraseth shot back. I can give you a solution in 10 seconds that might work, or a solution in 20 seconds that will work. Choose. Looked at the stakes. Looked at the Felician analyst who was risking everything to help a species she'd met an hour ago. Give me the 10-second solution. It has a 38% probability of miss. Then we're betting 62% of 2 million lives. I'll take those odds. Send it. The second firing solution uploaded. Rodriguez lined up the shot, whispered a prayer his grandmother had taught him, and fired. This time, the bolt missed Platform Echo by 17 meters. Recalculating emergency backup solution. Kiraseth was working faster than Chen had ever seen anyone work. All four hands moving independently across different input systems. But Echo is charging past threshold. It's going to fire. On Tau Ceti 4, evacuation sirens began wailing across the colony. People looked up at the sky, knowing something terrible was coming, but unable to comprehend the mathematics of orbital bombardment. The simple physics that said when a kinetic weapon traveling at orbital velocities hit a planetary surface, everything for hundreds of kilometers simply ceased to exist. That 7-year-old girl clutched her mother tighter, and somewhere in the cold dark, Commander James Mercer made a decision that would define everything that came after. All ships, he said quietly into the fleet-wide channel, execute Emergency Protocol Sanctuary. We're putting ourselves between those platforms and the colony. If those kinetic rounds are going to hit anything, they're going to hit us first. And the human fleet moved, not away from danger, but toward it, forming a living shield between the platforms and the planet, gambling that their armor and their quantum displacement fields could absorb impacts designed to crack continents. Platform Echo reached 100% charge and fired. The kinetic round from Platform Echo was, in essence, a tungsten rod the size of a school bus, accelerated to 30 kilometers per second. When it struck the UNSS Defiant, a cruiser that had positioned itself directly in the projectile's path, the impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The Defiant didn't just break apart. For a fraction of a second, its forward section achieved temperatures that turned metal into plasma. And then the shockwave propagated through the ship faster than the crew could register what was happening. 317 people ceased to exist in an instant that their comrades aboard other ships had to watch in high-definition tactical feeds. But the Defiant had done its job. The kinetic round, though still deadly, had been fragmented and deflected. Instead of striking New Phoenix, the colony's capital city, the debris scattered across an uninhabited oceanic region 2,000 kilometers away. The resulting impacts created tsunamis that would cause secondary damage, but not the extinction-level event the Velk had planned. Platform Foxtrot is at 97% charge, Webb reported, his voice cracking slightly. He'd served aboard the Defiant for 2 years before transferring to the Valiant. He knew every name on that crew roster. 98%. We have 30 seconds. On the Sovereign Dawn, Kiraseth had gone silent. All 4 of her hands were motionless on the controls, and her bioluminescent patches had dimmed to almost nothing. A Felician physiological response to shock. She'd just watched 300 beings die, because her calculations hadn't been perfect enough. Analyst Kiraseth. Captain Chen's voice was firm, but not unkind. I need you functional. Can you give me a solution for Platform Foxtrot? She didn't respond. Kiraseth. Chen moved closer, careful to stay in her field of vision. Her compound eyes tracked him, but there was something distant in her gaze. Listen to me. I know what you're feeling right now. I know you think this is your fault. It's not. Those people died doing their duty, protecting civilians who couldn't protect themselves. They knew the risks. They chose to be there. Now I need you to honor that choice, by finishing what they started. "I cannot guarantee accuracy," Kiraseth whispered. "I thought I could account for them, but I was wrong. If I am wrong again, then we'll deal with it. But if you don't try, Platform Foxtrot fires unopposed, and a lot more people die. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to do your best. That's all anyone can ask." Kiraseth's patches began to glow again, faintly at first, then with growing intensity. Her hands moved back to the controls. Recalculating. "This will be the most accurate solution I can provide, but I need the gunner to understand. The timing window is 0.4 seconds. Early or late, and we miss." "Rodriguez," Chen said into the weapons room comm, "you hear that?" "Yes, sir." The weapons specialist's voice was steady now, settled into the calm that came from accepting the impossible and deciding to do it anyway. 0.4 seconds. I've got it. Kiraseth uploaded the firing solution. The Sovereign Dawn's plasma lance aligned with Platform Foxtrot, which had just ticked over to 99% charge. The mathematics were brutal. 11 seconds for the plasma bolt to reach target, but the platform would finish charging in 8 seconds. That meant they had to fire before the platform completed its charge cycle, and predict where it would be 3 seconds after firing. "Solution locked," Kiraseth announced. "Firing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark." Rodriguez fired. The plasma bolt lanced across the void, and for 11 seconds, the entire human fleet held its breath for the second time in 5 minutes. On the Valiant, Mercer watched the trajectory calculations with an intensity that made his vision narrow to just that single line of data, that single thread of hope that separated survival from catastrophe. Platform Foxtrot reached 100% charge. The plasma bolt struck it 0.2 seconds before it could fire, punching through the charging mechanism and detonating the stored kinetic energy in a fireball that consumed the entire platform and 3 nearby asteroids. "Target destroyed." Webb's shout carried relief so profound it was almost a sob. "All platforms neutralized. Tau Ceti 4 is secure." Across the human fleet, the response was not celebration, but exhausted silence. They'd won, but the price had been the Defiant and its entire crew, plus the destroyers Falcon, Merlin, and the partial loss of the Hawk. Nearly 800 people dead in less than 30 minutes. Commander Mercer, it was Fleet Admiral Torres, her face on the main screen showing the same exhaustion Mercer felt in his bones. "Congratulations. You saved the colony, but we have a new problem." Mercer gestured for her to continue. "Velk High Command is screaming bloody murder across every diplomatic channel. They're calling our actions war crimes, unauthorized military strikes, violations of sovereign space, the works. The Galactic Council is convening an emergency session. They're threatening to sanction humanity, freeze our assets, potentially even authorize collective action against us." Mercer felt something cold settle in his chest. "They attacked our civilians first. They put them in detention camps. We gave them 72 hours to stand down." "I know, Commander. I was there when you delivered the warning. But the Velk are spinning this as humanity being the aggressor. That we used your warning as pretext for an unprovoked assault. And here's the thing." Torres paused, choosing her words carefully. "They're not entirely wrong. From a certain perspective, our response was disproportionate. We didn't just free the colonists. We crippled their infrastructure across multiple systems. We seized one of their capital ships. We destroyed military assets worth billions of credits. The Council is arguing we went too far." "They would have glassed an entire planet," Mercer said quietly. 2 million people. But they didn't, because we stopped them. And now we're the ones who look like the unstable aggressor. Torres shook her head. "Commander, I need you to attend this council session. We need someone who can explain our actions, who can show them why we did what we did. You delivered the warning. You should deliver the justification. Mercer looked around the operations center of the Valiant, looked at the crew who'd just fought and bled and watched their comrades die, looked at the tactical displays still showing the debris fields where ships had been, where people had been. When's the session? 18 hours. They're convening on Nexus Station. We can get you there in time, but you'll need to prepare testimony, review the legal precedents, work with our diplomatic corps to... No. Mercer's voice was flat. No lawyers, no diplomatic polish. They want to hear why we did what we did? I'll tell them. In plain language, let them judge accordingly. Commander, these are career politicians and diplomats. They'll eat you alive if you walk in there unprepared. Admiral, with all due respect, I've just spent the last hour watching good people die to save civilians from a species that thinks humans are primitives who don't deserve basic rights. I don't care what the Council thinks of me. I care about making sure they understand that humanity doesn't bluff, doesn't make empty threats, and doesn't abandon our people. If that makes me a poor diplomat, so be it. Torres studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, Commander. We'll do it your way. God help us all. The connection cut. Mercer turned to find Captain Chen on the comm channel, still broadcasting from the Sovereign Dawn. Captain, status of the prisoners? What's Commander Thexfor's condition? Uninjured and very angry, Chen replied. He's demanding to speak with his government, citing about 15 different treaties and conventions. Analyst Kiraseth has been interesting. She's requesting political asylum, said she won't go back to Velk space under any circumstances. That made Mercer pause. An asylum request from a Velk tactical analyst, someone with deep knowledge of their military capabilities, strategic planning, and internal politics. The intelligence value alone was enormous. But there were other considerations. Put her on the channel, Mercer said. A moment later, Kiraseth's image appeared on his screen. Her bioluminescent patches, or cycling through a pattern, Chen had quietly informed him, meant uncertainty mixed with determination. Analyst Kiraseth, Mercer said formally. You understand what you're requesting? Asylum means you can't return to Velk space. Can't contact your family. Everything you knew about your life ends. Are you certain? Commander Mercer, I have no family. The Velk saw to that when they integrated my homeworld. My parents were part of the resistance. They were executed when I was young. I was raised in Velk academies, trained to serve the Empire, taught that my people's culture was inferior and needed to be corrected. Her patches brightened with something that might have been anger. Today I helped you kill Velk soldiers. I helped you destroy Velk military assets. If I return, I will be interrogated. Probably tortured, certainly executed. But more than that, I don't want to return. I've seen what humanity does when your people are threatened. You don't lecture about civilization and superiority. You act. You warned them. They didn't listen. You made them listen. That's something the Velk never taught me was possible. Mercer considered this. Considered the implications. Considered the fact that in 18 hours he'd be standing before the Galactic Council defending actions that many would call war crimes. And here was a Velk tactical analyst ready to testify that humanity had shown more restraint and more honor than the empire that claimed to represent civilization. Asylum granted, he said. Captain Chen, Analyst Kiraseth, is now under human protection. Make sure she's treated well. Understood, sir. Mercer cut the channel and turned back to his operations center. 16 hours until they reached Nexus Station. 16 hours to prepare for what might be the most important testimony of his life. Instead, he reviewed footage of the battle, compiled records of the Velk's actions, and drafted notes that he would probably ignore when the moment came, because scripted speeches weren't his strength. Honesty was. Conviction was. He thought about that little girl with the sign, the one that said, "We are citizens, protect us." He'd protected her. He'd protected all of them. And if the Council wanted to condemn him for it, well, let them try. Nexus Station hung in neutral space, equidistant from the major galactic powers. A massive ring-shaped structure that served as the diplomatic heart of the Council. 47 species maintained permanent delegations here, and the Grand Assembly Chamber could hold representatives from over 200 worlds when full sessions were called. It was full now. Commander James Mercer walked down the central aisle in his dress uniform, unarmed as regulations required, acutely aware of the thousands of eyes tracking his movement. The chamber was designed to be intimidating. Curved walls rising 100 meters overhead, holographic displays showing each species' homeworld, and at the far end, the council dais where the current chairman, a Kethrid named Administrator Joval, waited with the patience of a being whose species lived for 3 centuries. Mercer reached the testimony platform and stood at attention. No lectern, just him and whatever words he could find. Commander James Mercer, Joval began, his voice carrying the peculiar harmonics of Kethrid speech. You have been summoned to explain the recent actions of United Nations stellar forces in Velk sovereign space. The Velk Dominion has filed formal complaints alleging that humanity engaged in unprovoked military aggression, violated multiple interstellar treaties, and caused damages estimated in the hundreds of billions of credits. How do you respond to these charges? Mercer looked up at the administrator, then slowly scanned the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. When he spoke, his voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the vast space. With respect, Administrator, the Velk Dominion is lying. The chamber erupted. Delegates from Velk client species were on their feet, shouting. The Velk delegation itself, led by the same counselor who dismissed humanity's warning on the broadcast, stood with scales flushed dark with rage. Joval hammered his gavel, the sound resonating like thunder. Order. Commander Mercer, this council expects decorum and respect for... No. Mercer's single word cut through the noise like a blade. You expect obedience. You expect humanity to sit quietly while you deliberate our survival according to rules we had no part in writing. But I'm not here to be obedient. I'm here to tell the truth, and the truth is simple. Humanity gave the Velk a legal warning. They violated it, and we responded exactly as we said we would. Joval's expression, insofar as Kethrid features could show expression, suggested he was reconsidering the wisdom of this public hearing. Commander, you will provide evidence to support your claims or face charges of contempt. Gladly, Mercer gestured, and the chamber's holographic displays came alive with footage. 74 hours ago, I delivered the following message to this council. His own face appeared on the screens, standing in this very chamber. The recording played, "You have 72 hours. Withdraw from the Tau Ceti colonies, release our civilians, or we respond." The recording continued, showing the Velk Archon crushing the data chip, declaring humanity a footnote. Mercer let it play for 30 seconds, then continued. That data chip contained our full operational plan. We told them exactly what we would do. Now, let me show you what they were doing while they laughed. The displays shifted to surveillance footage from Tau Ceti 4. Colonists in detention camps, children separated from parents, interrogations that crossed into torture, and in one particularly damning clip, a Velk administrator discussing plans to relocate the colonists to labor installations on resource extraction worlds. These are human citizens, Mercer said quietly, living peacefully on a world we settled legally under council-approved charters. The Velk claimed retroactive sovereignty through what they called historical precedent, a claim they filed with the council exactly 8 days before moving military forces into the system. They gave us no warning, no negotiation, just ships and soldiers and detention camps. The Tau Ceti system falls within Velk historical territorial claims dating back 4,000 years, the Velk counselor interjected. Your colonization was illegal from the beginning, regardless of your ignorance of our historical claims that you never filed with the council until it was convenient. Mercer shot back. I checked the records. Every species is required to register territorial claims within 6 months of contact with the council. The Velk registered thousands of systems. Tau Ceti wasn't among them. You didn't care about that system until we found something valuable there. Rare earth deposits worth trillions. Then suddenly, it became sacred ancestral territory. Murmuring rippled through the chamber. Mercer pressed on. But let's set aside the legal arguments about who owned what. Let's talk about what happened after we delivered our warning. We gave you 72 hours. You had 72 hours to evacuate peacefully, to negotiate in good faith, to find a solution that didn't involve human blood. Instead, you activated orbital kinetic platforms and prepared to bombard the colony from space. Genocide. That's what you were planning. The complete destruction of a planetary settlement and everyone on it. That's a lie. The Velk counselor's voice was shrill now. Those platforms were defensive installations, nothing more. If they were activated, it was only in response to your illegal... Analyst Kira Seth, Mercer called out. Would you join me, please? From the diplomatic observer section, the Thalician analyst stood and made her way to the testimony platform. Her presence caused immediate confusion. A Velk Empire analyst standing beside a human commander? State your name and position for the record, Mercer said. Tactical Analyst Kira Seth, formerly of the Velk Dominion Strategic Planning Division. Her voice was steady, though her bioluminescent patches betrayed her nervousness. I have served the Velk military for 16 years. And can you verify the function of the orbital platforms that were positioned around Tau Ceti 4? Yes. They were KP-7 class kinetic bombardment platforms. Their only purpose is planetary surface destruction. They have no defensive capabilities. They cannot intercept ships or deflect weapons. They exist solely to deliver extinction-level strikes against planetary targets. The chamber went absolutely silent. And what were their targeting parameters on the day in question? New Phoenix, the colony capital. Secondary targets included all major settlement zones. Projected casualties, 100% of surface population. Estimated time to complete bombardment, 47 minutes. Kiraseth turned to face the Velk delegation directly. I helped design those platforms. I wrote portions of the targeting algorithms. I know exactly what they were built to do. And I was aboard the Sovereign Dawn when Commander Thexvor received the order to activate them. The order didn't come from a defensive posture. It came from HAL Command, transmitted in the clear, with explicit instructions. Eliminate the human infestation. Leave no witnesses. The Velk counselor was on his feet now, scales flushed so dark they were almost black. You traitor! You have violated every oath you... Every oath I took was forced. Kiraseth's bioluminescent patches flared bright enough to hurt unprotected eyes. My people didn't choose to join your empire. We were conquered, subjugated, our culture erased, our children raised to serve Velk interests. And now you stand here and accuse humanity of aggression, when all they did was defend their people from the same fate you inflicted on mine. Zoval was hammering his gavel again, but the chamber was beyond his control now. Delegates were shouting, some in support of the Velk, others demanding investigations, still others calling for immediate sanctions. Mercer waited until the administrator managed to restore something resembling order before continuing. We gave them a warning, he said, his voice cutting through the remaining noise. We told them exactly what would happen. We even gave them our operational plan because we believed, naively perhaps, that no species would choose death over diplomacy when given clear terms and a fair timeline. We were wrong. The Velk chose death. They chose to keep our people in camps. They chose to activate weapons of planetary genocide. And when we responded exactly as we promised we would, they came running to this council crying victimhood. He turned slowly, addressing not just Joval, but every delegate in the chamber. I want to be very clear about something. Humanity doesn't want war. We're new to this galaxy. We're still learning your customs, your politics, your ancient grievances and alliances. But here's what we won't learn. We won't learn to abandon our people. We won't learn to accept that might makes right. We won't learn to let genocidal threats go unanswered because responding might be disproportionate. You call it disproportionate, Mercer continued, his voice taking on an edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. We crippled Velk infrastructure across multiple systems. We seized military assets. We killed soldiers. All true. But you know what we didn't do? We didn't bombard their civilian populations. We didn't put their children in cages. We didn't activate weapons that would have turned their cities into glass. Every strike we made was against military or infrastructure targets. Every casualty we inflicted was on combatants who chose to engage. And even in the heat of battle, when we captured the Sovereign Dawn, our first priority was evacuating the detention centers and protecting civilians. He gestured to the footage still playing on the displays. Human soldiers cutting through locks, medics treating injured colonists, that 7-year-old girl being carried to safety by a Marine who looked young enough to be her brother. This is who humanity is. We don't make empty threats. We don't abandon our people. And we don't apologize for protecting the innocent from those who would commit genocide in the name of sovereignty. If this council wants to sanction us for that, if you want to call us warmongers and aggressors, then do it. But understand that every species in this chamber will be watching. And they'll remember that when you stand before the council with your people in danger, this is the precedent you set. Mercer took a breath, then delivered his final point. The Velk say we violated their sovereignty. I say they violated something more fundamental, the principle that intelligent life has value, regardless of how long it's been traveling the stars. You can call us primitives, you can call us newcomers, but we're also citizens of this galaxy now, and we have the same right to exist, the same right to defend our people, and the same right to demand justice when that existence is threatened. If the Velk can't accept that, if this council can't accept that, then humanity will find its own path forward, with or without your blessing. He stood at attention, waiting for the judgment that would determine not just his fate, but possibly humanity's place in galactic civilization. The silence that followed was absolute, until from the observer section, someone began a slow, deliberate clapping. Then another joined, then another. Within moments, nearly a third of the chamber was applauding, while another third sat in shocked silence, and the final third, led by the Velk delegation, radiated fury. Administrator Joval hammered for order one final time. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he understood this moment would define his tenure. The council will deliberate on these matters. Commander Mercer, you are dismissed pending our decision. Analyst Kiraseth, your asylum request will be reviewed. This session is adjourned. As Mercer walked back down that long aisle, he passed the Velk delegation. The counselor who'd crushed his data chip 72 hours ago met his eyes, and in that moment, both beings understood. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven it wasn't just another species to be catalogued and managed. They were a force that demanded to be reckoned with. Outside the chamber, Fleet Admiral Torres was waiting with a tight smile. Well, Commander, you certainly made an impression. Half the council wants to give you a medal. The other half wants you arrested. And which half are we listening to? That, Torres said, is what we're about to find out. The council's deliberation took 6 days. During that time, Commander James Mercer remained aboard the Valiant, which had taken up position in neutral space near Nexus Station. He spent the hours reviewing damage reports, writing letters to the families of the 800 crew members lost in the Battle of Tau Ceti, and trying not to think about the fact that the galaxy's most powerful political body was deciding whether humanity would be embraced as equals or branded as pariahs. On the sixth day, the summons came. Mercer returned to the council chamber to find it even more crowded than before. Word had spread across the galaxy about his testimony, and now representatives from species he'd never even heard of were present, watching to see what precedent would be set. Administrator Zoval took his position at the center of the dais, and the chamber fell silent. After extensive deliberation and review of all evidence presented, Zoval began, his harmonics carrying across the vast space. The Galactic Council has reached the following conclusions. First, the Velk Dominion's claim to Tau Ceti is hereby ruled invalid. Their retroactive territorial filing is found to be in violation of Council Charter protocols. Second, the detention of human civilians and activation of orbital bombardment platforms is ruled to be an act of aggressive war and a violation of the Interstellar Conventions on Treatment of Sentient Populations. Mercer felt something in his chest unclench slightly. Third, Zoval continued, humanity's military response, while extreme in scope, is found to have been preceded by adequate warning and executed within the legal framework of collective self-defense. The actions of Commander Mercer and the United Nations Stellar Forces are deemed justified under circumstances of imminent genocidal threat. The Felk delegation exploded in protest, but Joval's gavel came down like thunder. However, and here the administrator's voice took on a sterner tone, the Council also finds that humanity's methods revealed a disturbing capacity for cyber warfare and infrastructure manipulation that threatens the security of all member species. We are therefore mandating the following. Humanity must submit all quantum displacement technology and network infiltration protocols to Council oversight within 60 standard days. Failure to comply will result in immediate economic sanctions and potential military action. And there it was. The galaxy would acknowledge humanity's right to exist and defend itself. But only if humans surrendered the very advantages that had made victory possible. Mercer stood, and this time, Joval didn't stop him from speaking. With respect, Administrator, no. The single word rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity will not submit our defensive technologies to Council oversight. We will not voluntarily disarm ourselves while species like the Velk maintain weapons capable of planetary genocide. We will, however, propose an alternative. A mutual technology disclosure treaty. Every species on this council submits their most advanced military technologies for inspection and oversight. Not just humanity, everyone. If you truly want galactic security, it has to apply equally. Joval's expression was unreadable. You understand what you're proposing would require amendments to the Council Charter that haven't been changed in 2,000 years. Then maybe it's time for an update. The galaxy isn't what it was 2,000 years ago. New species are joining all the time. Old assumptions about who's civilized and who's primitive are proving wrong. Either we're all equal members of this council, or we're just planets waiting for someone stronger to decide our fates. The chamber erupted again, but this time the division wasn't between those who supported humanity and those who opposed it. It was between those who saw Mercer's point, that the current system was fundamentally unequal, and those who benefited from that inequality and didn't want to change. The debate raged for 3 hours. Proposals and counterproposals flew back and forth. Some species threatened to withdraw from the council entirely if technology sharing was mandated. Others demanded immediate implementation. And through it all, Mercer stood at the testimony platform, calm and immovable as a stone in a river. Finally, Administrator Joval called for order one last time. The Council will form a committee to explore Commander Mercer's proposal of equal technology disclosure. This committee will have one standard year to develop recommendations. In the interim, humanity will not be required to submit their current technologies, but will also refrain from further offensive operations, except in direct defense of human lives or territory. Do you accept these terms, Commander? Mercer considered. A year wasn't long in galactic politics, but it was time. Time to rebuild, to heal, to prepare for whatever came next. And more importantly, it was acknowledgement that humanity's voice mattered, that their ideas could shape policy, that they weren't just subjects of the Council, but participants in it. We accept, he said. 3 weeks later, Commander James Mercer stood in a very different kind of assembly. A memorial service aboard the Valiant for the crews of the Defiant, Falcon, Merlin, and Hawk. 800 names were read aloud, one by one, while holographic candles flickered in the ship's main hangar bay. When the last name had been spoken, Mercer addressed the assembled crew. These people died protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. They died because we kept our word. Because we refused to let politics override principle. Because when the galaxy told us to accept injustice, they chose to fight for something better. Their sacrifice bought safety for 2 million colonists. It bought humanity a seat at the council table. It bought proof that our species, despite being new to the stars, understands something fundamental that older civilizations seem to have forgotten. That strength without compassion is just tyranny. And that the measure of a civilization isn't how advanced its technology is, it's how it treats those who can't fight back. He paused, looking at the faces around him, young and old, from dozens of countries, representing humanity's diversity and its unity. The Velk called us primitives. They thought we were bluffing. They learned otherwise. But here's what I hope the galaxy really learns from this. Humanity doesn't want to be feared. We want to be respected. We want to build, to explore, to contribute to galactic civilization. But we will never, ever abandon our people. We will never make threats we don't intend to keep. And we will never apologize for having the courage to act when action is required. The service concluded with a moment of silence, followed by the traditional ringing of the ship's bell. 800 times, one for each lost soul. Afterward, Mercer found himself in the observation deck, looking out at the stars, when a familiar presence joined him. Tactical analyst Kira Seth stood a respectful distance away, her bioluminescent patches glowing softly in the dim light. "Your species confuses me," she said quietly. "You're simultaneously the most dangerous and most honorable beings I've encountered. How do you reconcile that?" Mercer thought about it for a moment. We don't, really. Humans are contradictions. We're capable of terrible violence and incredible compassion, often in the same breath. We build weapons that can crack planets, and then risk our lives to save a single child. Maybe that's what being human means, living in that contradiction and trying every day to choose the better path. The Velk think only in terms of dominance hierarchies, Kirasef said. The strong rule, the weak serve. It's simple, clean. It's also how you end up activating planetary bombardment platforms instead of negotiating. Simple isn't always better. Kiraset's patches flickered in a pattern Mercer had learned meant thoughtful agreement. I have been reviewing human history through your databases. Your species has engaged in countless wars, committed atrocities, nearly destroyed your own homeworld multiple times. Yet here you are, lecturing the galaxy about morality. Yeah, Mercer admitted. We're hypocrites. We're flawed. We're still figuring things out. But you know what? At least we're trying. At least when we make mistakes, we learn from them instead of codifying them into empire policy. The difference between humanity and the Velk isn't that we're better. It's that we're still trying to become better. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. Commander, Kirasek said eventually, I want to formally join the United Nations Stellar Forces. I know my asylum is still being processed, but I want to contribute. I want to help build the kind of civilization that you described in your testimony. One that values all life equally, that chooses compassion over conquest. Will you have me? Mercer extended his hand, a human gesture he'd had to explain to her weeks ago. She took it carefully with one of her 4 hands, and they shook. Welcome aboard, analyst. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. 6 months later, the first session of the Council Committee on Mutual Technology Disclosure convened. Humanity sent a delegation led by Fleet Admiral Torres. Kiraseth attended as the human delegation's technical advisor, the first non-human to officially serve in a human governmental capacity. The negotiations were difficult. Species that had maintained technological advantages for millennia didn't want to surrender them. But slowly, gradually, momentum built. Smaller species, ones that had always lived under the threat of more powerful neighbors, began to see the appeal of a system where strength came from collective security rather than individual armament. The Velk fought every proposal, every amendment, every attempt at reform. The revelation of their attempted genocide at Tau Ceti had shocked many species who'd thought the Dominion represented civilization. Client species like the Thylicians began quietly pushing for more autonomy. Internal fractures appeared. 1 year after Commander Mercer's testimony, the Council passed Resolution 7749, the Mutual Security and Technology Transparency Act. It wasn't everything humanity had proposed. There were compromises, limitations, clauses that would take decades to implement. But it was a start. It was proof that change was possible. Commander Mercer, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's permanent representative to the Council, stood at the same testimony platform where he delivered his warning and his defense. 1 year ago, he said to a chamber that had learned to listen when humans spoke, I told you that humanity doesn't make empty threats. Today, I'm making a promise instead. We will submit our technologies for oversight, because we believe in the principles of mutual security. We will work with every species here to build a galaxy where disputes are settled through negotiation, not genocide, where strength is measured not by how much you can destroy, but by how much you can protect. He paused, scanning the faces and features of 47 different species. The Velk thought we were primitives. They thought our warning was theater. They learned the hard way that humanity means what it says. Now I'm asking this council to learn something else. That humans are not just warriors, but builders. Not just destroyers, but creators. We didn't come to the stars to dominate. We came to participate, to contribute, to be part of something larger than ourselves. Admiral Mercer's final words echoed through the chamber and across the broadcast channels that carried the session to billions of viewers throughout the galaxy. They called us primitives until the dream we've activated, until they realized that technology isn't what defines civilization. What defines civilization is what you choose to do with that technology. Do you use it to build or destroy? To protect or dominate? To unite or divide? Humanity has made its choice. We proved it at Tau Ceti. We're proving it again today. And we'll keep proving it every day until the galaxy understands that the newest voice in this chamber has just as much right to be heard as the oldest. He stood at attention one final time, then delivered the line that would be quoted in history texts for generations. We warned them. They didn't listen. Let's make sure that lesson wasn't learned in vain. The chamber fell silent, and then slowly, delegates from across the political spectrum rose to their feet in acknowledgement. Not agreement necessarily, but recognition. Humanity had earned its place at the table. Outside the chamber, reporters from 100 worlds swarmed for statements. HFY Endurance Tales was broadcasting live, their viewership numbers breaking records. If you followed this journey from that first warning to this moment of hard-won peace, hit like and subscribe to keep following humanity's story among the stars. Share this with anyone who needs to remember that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's always necessary. Drop a comment about which moment resonated most with you. Was it Mercer's testimony, Kiraset's defection, or that desperate battle to save Tau Ceti? Admiral James Mercer walked back to the human delegation's quarters, tired but satisfied. His calm buzzed with congratulations from across human space. But the message that made him smile came from Tau Ceti 4. Admiral Mercer, the girl with the sign wanted you to know she's safe. We all are. Thank you for keeping your promise. Governor Chen, New Phoenix Colony. Attached was a photo. That same 7-year-old girl, now 8, holding a new sign. This one read, "They listened." Mercer saved the image and sent it to every human service member who'd fought in the Battle of Tau Ceti. It was proof, not of humanity's strength, but of why that strength mattered. The galaxy had called them primitives, had doubted their warnings, had tested their resolve. Humanity had answered with precision, honor, and an unwavering commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And in doing so, they'd proven that sometimes the newest voices have the most important things to say. The Dreamweave had activated. The galaxy would never be the same. And humanity, flawed, contradictory, determined humanity, was just getting started.